Who? All right, good. All right, good morning. Welcome to, where are we, Cleveland? Great opening joke, right? Yeah. So thank you guys for coming to our talk today. I am Tim Medin. I own a security consulting company. Been doing pen testing for a number of years. Teach with SANS. I'm INS faculty, the program director for SANS. This is Derek. Derek will introduce himself.
Hey, everybody. I'm Derek Banks. I work for Black Hills Information Security. I don't own my own company because that's hard. So I just work for a company. I'm a pen tester mainly, previous blue team, and then I came over to the dark side because there were cookies.
Good deal. So again, thank you guys. Thank all of you for coming here. What we wanted to go through today is, some of the simple things that we've seen kind of over the years. Everybody likes to focus on the really hard, the real difficult attacks, but let's be honest. That's not where all these things are happening, right? So many of the hacks and so many of honestly, the kind of cool stuff that we see is we try the really simple, the really dumb stuff first. Everyone's kind of trying to shoot for that, that next generation bypass and all sorts of craziness, but realistically, it's these simple little things. So we encourage you, be a little bit lazy. My first programming class, I was in 8th grade, Mr. Kaler, and he had this big, you guys remember the track printers? Yeah, those things were awesome, right? Like you could print banners. So he had this banner, it's like something like the best programmers are the laziest people or something like that. My mom was pissed. She's like, oh, don't be lazy. I'm like, Mom, but she's like, no, don't be lazy. But so much of what we do, that laziness sort of helps, right? Because we end up like, I'm not going to do this again. Let's automate this. Let's try the simple, the dumb things first, because oftentimes they are going to work. And this very much aligns with APT, right? You guys are all familiar with APT? Right? APT is the Advanced Persistent Threat. If you've read any breach information, one of the APT groups is the people that have done the hack. Right? It's never actually Steve in his mom's basement. It's always the advanced persistent threat because no one wants to admit they were attacked by something really dumb. Right? Advanced persistent in threat. Oftentimes that threat is not very advanced. Their persistence is not really there either. And they're sort of marginally a threat. Key one here is Equifax. All right, I sort of hate to pick on them, but it's a cool story because it's relevant. But between the time when that vulnerability was disclosed and the patch was released, and when the breach was detected, how long was that? Like 5 months? It was a number of months, right? And we see this breach after breach after breach, where someone is popped with an old vulnerability, something we have known about for years, for months, or sometimes even years. And that ends up being the way in. Is that advanced? Not really, right? It was just, any script kiddie could run some of the code. Is it really even persistent? Right? Are they really trying if it took them like 4 months to get in? Right? Not really. And then we see this time after time after time. And we see people trying to defend against the latest and greatest things, but they're missing some of these really simple type things.
Well, if I've learned anything in my years of information security is that phishing is the most advanced attack that an attacker can pull off, right? Every time you hear in the news, this is the most advanced thing we've ever seen, it's always phishing, right? Why? Because it works. So phishing must be hard to configure, right? To pull off. What's the first thing you need to have if you're going to launch a phishing campaign? A domain? It's real hard to find a domain, right? So it's real easy to go out, register a domain. You go and do something like securemessaging.companyname.com. Well, that might not work to get through an email or an email gateway, right? So what can you do? You can go find something that's already categorized. There's a site called expireddomains.net. You get a categorized domain that's expired. It's already got reputation, and you can use that for your phishing campaign. So how do you send the emails? It's hard to set up an email server, right? Everybody runs their own email server. Well, Turns out that services like Office 365, Yahoo, they're actually kind of a bit permissive in what you can send. I mean, does anybody think in Office 365, if I tie my domain to their service, I can't send macro-enabled documents, right? Oh, yeah, I can, right? So do you think that the email gateway is going to trust the reputation of what I'm doing? Absolutely. And then on the flip side, if I want to set up a command and control channel, if you have a proxy, you're probably doing categorization blocks, right? No, the same thing works there. If I have a domain that was already categorized, it sails right through. This is really hard to do. It takes visiting a website and spending $10. So here's an example. All of these were categorized as something like business or IT. Totally worked.
So just to touch on that whole phishing thing, we tell users over and over again, do not click on blank in the email. Fill in the blank. No, seriously, have you guys not heard this before? Don't anything, right? Don't click on links in email, right? Now, I hate email to start with, but we tell users over and over again, don't click on links in email. Any of your organizations use secure email? What is in 100% of secure email?
The link.
Link or an attachment, right? So we're like, okay, wait. Don't click on links and attachments, but wait. Unless it's a secure or really important email. And then we're confused when people open the email and they get popped, right? So we had some of this. We actually ended up with the expired domains going through, finding previously categorized thing, literally anything with the word message in it, and then you fake that secure email, right? Because we get this mixed message. Don't click on links. Well, unless you kind of sort of have to. Got it? No, of course, people absolutely don't.
Unless it looks legit.
Oh, yeah, unless it looks legitimate. Right? And these days, even the bad guys coming from, pick a random country, they can use the grammar checkers and they get better and better, right? Windows Defender, this has since gone away, but it was one of my favorite things. I think maybe the two of us were working together on this one, actually, at the time. We had a Cobalt Strike. You guys familiar with Cobalt Strike? Love me some Cobalt Strike. I keep hoping if I say that enough, they'll give me a free copy. Because I can buy a car, or I can get Cobalt Strike. I can feed my children, or Cobalt Strike. One of the two. Anyway, so we copy and pasted a payload into an Excel document. I tried to save it, and Excel's like, nope. I see what you're trying to do here. Something here doesn't look good. Now, I could try the hard method of reverse engineering, like what's the check, like which piece of whatever is in here is the piece that's bad, right? Like I can remove lines of code and add lines in and try to change it and do weird things with the case. I'm kind of lazy. So I got a little bit, what I did is I ended up copy and pasting the whole thing. I copy and pasted it into cell A12. And I told Excel, hey, when you launch, run whatever in A12. And Windows Defender's like, oh, fair enough. Looks good, right? Like there was no reverse engineering needed. This was like this simple, lazy thing. Now this lasted about 6 weeks or so before they started knocking this out. But try this simple, stupid stuff first. You're going to save yourself a bunch of time, and it's just, just kind of funny too.
In case anybody can't notice, the text is white.
Oh yeah, and turn the text white so they can't see it. Totally safe, right? Yeah.
So, how many people in here have some advanced, endpoint protection, something, cyber APT Blinky box agent on your endpoints? Yeah, okay. So do you guys want to see how I use a really advanced technique to bypass one of these, uses AI to catch the next generation of zero-day threats? This is really advanced. I used NCAT. No, seriously. So this particular one was Cylance, and the engagement was not a red team or a pivot. This is something that we do a command and control test. So we try and run different levels of sophisticated malware to get past whatever endpoint protection is on the box. And Cylance was actually doing a pretty good job with the PowerShell that I had. I had a C# wrapper with some shell code. It caught it. I'm like, oh, that's actually really awesome. And then I, on that machine, went with the browser to the Mmap project and downloaded NCAT and shoveled a reverse shell. Cylance, yep, that's cool. So I wonder a lot as a pen tester, and when I do get caught by these kinds of things, do the security vendors really focus on pen tester and pen tester tools, or do they actually catch bad stuff? So it's been my experience actually using something custom or using something that isn't, Metasploit or PowerShell Empire or Cobalt Strike. It tends to go through. This is, of course, a really simple example, but hey, I had a shell out of the network.
Yeah, we're switching back and forth. We got this. We've done this before. All right. So you guys familiar with Spectre and Meltdown? Somebody want to come up here and explain it to us real quick? Spectre and Meltdown, it was the branch prediction. It was that processor vulnerability. Like, I've watched presentations on it. I've read about it. I still think I get about maybe 5%, and I might be exaggerating on that number. But it's really cool. I understand what it does, but the actual details of what goes inside the processor is, I'm pretty sure, dark magic. Like, I think outside Intel, they have a series of kittens that they just sacrifice to keep that dark magic going year after year after year. But anyway, right after this came out, I had a number of clients come up to me. They're like, Tim, what should we do with Spectre Meltdown? And I was like, honestly, you should change your passwords policy. And they're like, Tim, I don't think you understand this. And I'm like, well, I don't, but no, you should change your password policy. And they're like, well, Tim, that's not what Spectre and Meltdown are. They don't really have anything to do with that. Why are you recommending this? And I said, well, because I ended up getting your organization with crappy passwords. You're focusing up here when you've got gaping holes down here. Right? You're trying to patch your entire network with emergency patches instead of making just some basic hygiene changes that are going to help keep some of the bad guys out. So traditionally, over the years, how long have auditors said that we have to change our passwords? We have to rotate every how many days? 90 days. You guys know why? Well, you guys probably didn't know this, but when Moses came down from the mountain, he had a third tablet. On that third tablet, it was, you should change passwords every 90 days, and don't click on links and email us. It's really important, right? No, but we've had this sort of concept. Don't we have to rotate every 90 days? Why? Because in the 70s, it took 90 days to crack a password. Now, out of curiosity, how many of you were born after the 70s? And I shouldn't even ask this. Oh, God.
That's really depressing.
I feel so old. Oh, terrible. Yeah. All right. Yeah, so in the 70s, it took 90 days to crack a password. These days, we've got, the water-cooled, GPU-powered password cracking rigs where we can get billions of password cracks per second. We have things like Pass the Hash where I don't have to crack it. We have Mimikatz where I can get it in clear text. We also have a cool thing called the phone where you can ask people for their password and they'll give it to you. Right? So we've got this whole concept of this password rotation policy every 90 days. It's designed to stop a breach. According to the Verizon breach report, how long is it between a breach happens and when it's detected?
6 months.
It's about 6 months. How many rotations is that? 2. Well, I can pretty much guarantee you at no point in time was Vladimir in the Ukraine go, oh, comrade, we screwed now. They changed password. Right? That's my terrible Russian accent. I will offend all of you at some point. Right? How many of you do pen testing as part of your job? How often have you been through your probably 1 week or 2 week engagement where someone changed the password? You're like, oh, we're done now. Right? This doesn't happen. So people, they end up getting to this idea that, you know what? We should change password because it makes us more secure. And then we've got these complexity requirements, right? Uppercase, lowercase, number, and a special character. Any of you ever worked the help desk after a holiday? Oh, you know what I'm asking next, right? What's the phone call you get like 100% for the next 4 days? What's my password? Can you reset my password? Right? And they hate calling IT because we get tired of answering that question. They feel dumb asking, so they come up with really smart ideas. Smart in non-secure ways, but sort of ingenious nonetheless, right? They're looking out their window, they're like, oh man, it's snowing outside, and coming back after Christmas, not really here so much, but like in other parts of the country, there's snow on the ground, I can't remember my password, and then 90 days later, they see like, the flowers coming up. 90 days later, it's, hot outside. They're like, man, the only way I could just look out my window here at work and remember my password. Right? So they look out their window right now and they're like, oh, it's spring. I got capital S, lowercase, pring. It's like, oh, it's not long enough. And I can't repeat the last 472 passwords I've had. And ideally, there's going to be a spring next year. So I need a way to differentiate this spring from next spring, and I also need a number. So the users sit there for 45 minutes to an hour to figure out what this number might be that will distinguish this spring from next spring. And then they end up with, obviously, spring 2018. Oh, but now we might need a special character. Exclamation point, right? And then in 90 days we have 90 day fall. What happened to your summer, dude? Yeah, 90 days later we have fall, autumn. It's twice as hard that month to guess, right? But we see this time after time after time. I cannot tell you how many organizations I've gone into, and I'm like, look, I'm just going to try a simple password of spring 2018 across your entire environment for every single user. And I've had people tell me, like, oh, it's not going to work here. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Do you have a technical limitation? They're like, no, we told people not to. I'm like, gotcha. You want to bet a stake on this? Right? And I try this across the environment. I get credentials, and clearly I don't lose many stake bets. It's not that funny of a joke. Right? This type of stuff happens over and over and over again. So we'd like to change some sort of technical thing that says, you know what? We're going to actually look at this password, and it has a season and year. Sorry, we're not going to allow it. Because every single one of those entropy checkers tells you that it is a super secure password, spring 2018 bang. But every single bad guy and pen tester on the face of the planet is trying spring 2018 right now. Right? So we need some sort of technical implementation to prevent those kinds of crappy passwords. Because they work over and over again. Derek and I were working on an assessment, and we were having a terrible time. And like in the middle of the engagement, I'm like, does anybody need a sales engineer? Because clearly I don't have this technical thing nailed down. And then like the next week on a Monday morning, Derek texts me. He's like, hey, remember that other client we were working on? Yeah, I got in spring 2018, single factor authentication. Then used Kerberoasting to get a whole bunch of service tickets. And then I asked if I could put it in the slide deck, and I did.
Yeah, so when I Kerberoasted, I went to go crack those passwords, and how many? Do you want to guess whether or not I was able to crack any of those 48 tickets? No, those service accounts had super great passwords. Look, when there's an 8-character password policy, when I get into an environment and I see there's an 8-character password policy, I giggle like a schoolgirl because I know unless there's only 5 users in the environment, I'm going to be able to take advantage of that. And I use super sophisticated tools to do this. For this particular one, I used a tool that was already built by someone at Black Hills called Mail Sniper. I took the tool and I pointed it at their OWA server, and I hit tab and for the parameters, and then I filled in the right values, and it totally worked, right? So bad passwords are one of those things where we can't harp on it enough. And every time you tell an organization, I got in because I used a great hacking tool called a browser. and was able to, guess a password. I mean, that's actually happened to me before, where I had email addresses that I gathered for a company, and I went to their customer portal, and they had username enumeration that they were vulnerable to, and I used some of their employees' email addresses, and I guessed company name 123, and I got 2 people I could log in to their customer portal. Oh, man. Sometimes it's just too easy, right? There was another time where, excuse me, where me and another Black Hills guy, we were on an engagement, and we were able to guess passwords for users and get into their O365 environment. And so we wanted a VPN in. And so we started searching through their mail for things like VPN. And we found that they were emailing back and forth in the clear certificates to put into their endpoint, their client VPN solution. And so we went and downloaded that client VPN solution and installed it and put the certificate in place, and were able to VPN in. That was terribly difficult to do. And then we noticed that they had SharePoint in the cloud. We could get into that as well, right? So sometimes it's just the easiest things that work.
Cool. So there are so many resources available for us. It's one of the great things about our community, right? Like, we see so many people, they find a cool bug and they blog about it and they walk you through step by step on what they did. And we've got a ton of resources where people will do the same thing with the CTF. Here's the CTF challenge. Here's my thought process as I've gone through it. And some of the really good ones will show you, hey, I tried this, but it failed. And we can use those as a way to develop ourselves. You can literally grab that same tool, that same binary, that same, device, and actually walk through some of the same stuff because people share so much. That's one of the fantastic things about industry, right? You don't see other organizations and other industries sharing you the internal details of what they do with their product. And people here, we share so much. So I have a friend of mine, he bought a web camera in 2012, 2011-ish. Bought a web camera. And he's like, you know what? I hear this IoT thing. Actually, I don't think IoT was a term yet. But he had this camera. He's like, let's take a look inside the binary. So he had this fantastic walkthrough on what he did to look inside this firmware. So he bought this TrendNet camera in 2011, did the blog post in 2012. And he walks through using Binwalk. Now, how many of you have heard of or have used Binwalk before? Okay, a few of you, fantastic. But back in those days, Binwalk wasn't nearly as full-featured as it is today. So what we had to do back in those days is we had to divide up the binary file ourselves. It would show you where the headers were, but you had to do some of the manual extraction yourselves. And he walks through these steps where he carves this binary, this firmware. And then he looks at the file system, and it turns out it's just a Linux-type file system. And he looks in this directory called server. In the server directory, now this is a web camera, there's a directory called Anani. Guess what Anani stands for? Anonymous. So he goes back to the web camera, browses to CGI bin Anani mjpeg.cgi, and now he has access to the camera. No authentication required. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of these things all over the internet. People have them in their houses, their kids' rooms, all sorts of weird places. Like there's one in like this creepy, I don't know, I think it's the place where it uses the lotion. Yeah, it was creepy. And I'm like, I couldn't stop watching. I'm like, I want to know what happens here. I'm going to regret it, but I want it. Yeah, so weird stuff all over the place. So I'm like, you know what? I want to try some of this too. So I bought my own web camera, different brand, and walked through some of these same simple steps. Used Binwalk, found the headers, extracted, and I looked at the file system. Now, on a Linux file system, what is one of the first files we like to look at? Etsy password, right? In the olden days, Etsy password actually contained the password hashes. But because any user that has access to the system can read that, we've realized that that's what we call a bad idea. So we move those password hashes into another file, typically our shadow file. Now with our IoT type devices, we've gone back in time. And those password hashes go back into Etsy password. And they're oftentimes not properly hashed, not properly secured. In fact, I've seen them sometimes in clear text. Or they're encrypted with base 64. Okay, and in the example I had, this password was encrypted with base 60. The passwords were base 64 encrypted. Now, base 64 is not encryption. Encryption requires a key. But I was able to decode these passwords and read through it. I looked through and there's like user 1, root, factory test. Look back in the interface. User 1, root. There is no factory test. Log into the device. Factory test exists. So there was a hard-coded credential inside the firmware that's just simply extracting, looking at literally the first file I should look at, finding this credential and access the camera. And you're able to do that, and you can bypass all the authentication on the camera, make any changes that you want to on the device, and view the video feed. It took about 37 seconds to do all of this. I ended up contacting the manufacturer, and I'm like, anybody else like money? Right? Yeah, I like money. Right? We should hang out, maybe get a latte. All right. This was before big bug bounties were really big. So at the time, you couldn't just say, hey, do you guys have a bug bounty program? You also should not call them up and say, hey, I've got a bug, pay me or I tell the world. There's a technical hacking term for that. It's called extortion. And so what you do is you use some more legalese, like how would you compensate for the exclusive disclosure of a vulnerability in your product? Right? And I ended up getting, I think it was like $3,000 or $4,000 for this. And it took me, no joke, about 2 minutes to do the actual hack, if you will. And it was literally a hack by numbers, and then looking in the first file we should look at and extracting the information. And so much is like this, where we just try the really simple, dumb stuff, and it ends up working for us. One of my other favorite bugs, this is literally my favorite bug of all time. How many of you have children? How many of your children like ice cream? Like two hands? Then your kid's like, oh my gosh, you're terrible parents. Anyway, we've all had this happen, right? Like, a kid comes up to you, it's like, Dad, can I have some ice cream? No. Can I have some ice cream? No. Can I have some ice cream? Later. And I know what that means, Dad. Oh, God. No. Can I have some ice cream? No. 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 Can I have some ice cream, Dad? No. Can I have some ice cream, Dad? No. Can I have some ice cream? Right? And eventually you're like, fine, just eat some freaking ice cream. This is the can I have some ice cream, Dad bug. It's my favorite bug of all time. Literally, you could authenticate to the SQL server, my SQL server, say, hey, can I authenticate? No. Can I authenticate? No. Can I authenticate? No. No, no, no. Fine. You tried hard enough. Here you go. I also call it the soccer trophy authentication. I was like, good enough, Tommy. You can have access. You tried, right? I don't want to hurt your feelings. But literally, with this flaw, 1 out of 256 times, it's like, fair enough. You're in. Yeah, beautiful bug, right? And it was, I ended up contacting this guy, and then the Cisco auth bug. There was an SSH authentication vulnerability with Cisco devices, where if you had a private key, it was like, oh, you're good. Any private key. It didn't even have to be shaped like a key. If you had a file that said, this is my private key, the device is like, oh, yeah, okay, you tried. Like, I see you have a key there. You know, you're in. And I actually emailed with this guy, like, how did you find this bug? Because we're like, did you virtualize the Cisco device and then, reverse engineer it? He's like, don't tell anybody. But I accidentally overwrote my private key, and I was able to authenticate. I was like, oh. That was pretty elite, right? So he smashed his authentication credentials and was still able to log into the device. Right? So these, again, just these simple sort of bugs. I think the issue with this one was it was identified, someone was running a scanner and the vuln scanner said it was able to log in and this dude wasn't able to log in. So he rage scripted some authentication. He's like, I'm going to try this over and over again. It's like 4, 1 in a billion. Log in. It's like, no. Okay, fair enough. Device is like, yeah, you're in. So we're kind of related to that. Try the simple stuff. Try the really kind of dumb stuff. Don't be afraid to go sort of lowbrow. Related to that, learn from the new people that are around you. It's really easy for us technologically advanced people to show off. Let me show you how much of a badass I am. Because they might come into your office, your cube, call you up, and like, hey, look at this cool thing I did. And then you, being the badass, you're like, yeah, but here's a cooler way to do it. They're only going to come to you so many times with their great ideas when every single time you squash them and show them a better way to do it. And then, it's nice to be helpful, but celebrate with those new people. And they're going to come up with some of these really weird, interesting bugs. They might come up with the really simple, dumb approach. And I found that. Sometimes I'm up here, and someone's like, hey, have you tried, just logging in 1,000 times? Why would I do that? Oh, it worked. Okay, fair enough. Right? Don't be afraid. Use those. The new people can be extremely valuable. They give you a different perspective on this. We end up staying with this really high technical stuff, but use that knowledge of other people, especially their different industries or different backgrounds. You guys want to add to this?
Yeah, and I think we said in the description that we were going to tell you some of the things that really frustrate us as penetration testers. And I'll tell you, it's not the cyber blinky box stuff. It's not really any kind of specific tool. We talked about passwords. If you have a long password policy, like 15 or more characters, I really have a bad day. I really don't like that. So another thing, if you don't allow your workstations to talk to each other, have like Cisco private VLANs or use the Microsoft firewall, if I get on a box and I have credentials and I can't talk to anything but servers, I want to cry. Like really, because that's a really bad day. The times that I've been caught, actually my first 3 years at Black Hills, I kind of was getting a little depressed because I thought, man, this is not getting better. This is really easy, and wow, no one is doing a good job anymore. But then this last year, I started getting caught more. You want to know what was catching me? Endpoint log monitoring. The companies that were looking at what was happening on their endpoints and having someone pay attention to that, alerts for things that aren't normal. Like, how many people run net commands normally in your day-to-day job? Nobody. Guess one of the first commands I run when I get on a box? Net commands, right? So if you are logging what's being run on the box, commands that are being run, and you alert on a net command, that might not mean that something bad is happening, but it might mean something bad is happening, right? I had anytime there's a team that has come up with something creative, like I had how many people have Sims? Well, a couple of people. I know you do. So I had a company that their management wouldn't let them buy a SIM until they instrumented appropriately. They were using Microsoft's secure SCCM and playbooks to basically take everything off their endpoints, and they wrote playbooks to look for anomalies on their endpoint. Not a security product, really. And they caught me in 15 minutes. So those are the things that, as a pen tester, and attackers are going to do the same kind of things. If you have an attacker on your box or in your network, they're going to start running commands that your normal user won't run.
Yeah, and related to that, it's again, we like to focus on those really high-tech, huge vulnerabilities, but oftentimes it's the simple things. Like, my users aren't, Steve in accounting doesn't run the net command. Right? Why is Sally in marketing all of a sudden running PowerShell? These are different.
Encoded PowerShells.
Encoded PowerShell, right? Can she read that encrypted PowerShell? Sort of related to this, this is taken from a CTF, a class that I teach with SANS. And it's really funny because it's designed, it's a level 1 question. There's four levels, and it's, I think, the third question. And it is designed to be really, really easy. So let's just walk through this from a very simple perspective. First off, what types of characters? Now focus on the characters, right? Baby steps. Baby steps here. What types of characters do we see?
Uppercase, lowercase, numbers.
Uppercase, lowercase, numbers, right? There's equal signs at the end. These are not trick questions, by the way. Right, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, equal signs at the end. This is indicative of what? Base 64, right? Base 64, we've got uppercase, lowercase, and numbers. 26 plus 26 plus 10 is 62. And then we've got the plus and the slash. And we might have additional equal signs at the end for padding. And we may or may not have that. Similar to base 64, we have base 32. It's a slightly smaller character set, but the same sort of thing. So you make sure that you go through with those baby steps, because I ended up spending about, I think it was like 6 hours trying to base 64 decode something when it was actually base 32. I didn't take that step back and that baby step. So we see that the people in the class, let me flip my screen here. So I use one of my favorite decoders here is burp. So in burp, here's my base 64 encoded string. I can simply say decode as base 64. And now I get this next string of text. And this is related, no joke, I've seen this same sort of encryption technique with some, there's a web service for a mobile application. And they were using this to sign their payloads. Yeah. Anyways, so what kind of characters do we see here? Hex characters, right? This looks like 0 through 9, A through F. So again, use my handy dandy tool, burp. So we'll say ASCII hex. And then we end up with this. This is where things go sideways in my class. So I see the advanced people. They see this like it's shellcode. Right, so they rip this out, they open up IDAs. Like maybe there's encoding techniques to make this not work as well in IDAs. Let's try Hopper, let's try Redair, let's try Binary Ninja. Or maybe we have to XOR it with something else to try to figure it out. And they go into this deep, dark rabbit hole of sadness for the next 45 minutes. And it's hilarious because I can tell the advanced teams because they're stuck here. Meanwhile, Joe Schmo, this is their first class they've ever taken, it's like, well, burp works twice, don't fail me now. So they literally come back over here, they're like, I don't know, maybe it's URL, maybe it's something else. And they literally try all of the options, and they finally get to gzip, and it's like, something weird showed up. And you can kind of see this. It's so funny when it happens, because you got these advanced people, and you can see brain fluid dripping out of their ears. And this total noob guy is like, hey, I got it. And they're like, what'd you do? He's like, that little drop down? I just clicked on it a bunch of times. And they're like, right. Well done. So we end up seeing this. This is what kind of character set? Looks like hex again. Decode as ASCII hex. And we've got a lovely Rickroll. Okay? Yeah. But no joke, I've seen some of these things like this. Related to this, I see this all the time, especially with the more advanced people. When they get stuck in a problem like this, they don't ask for help. One of the most empowering things that I've literally had to train myself to do is say, I don't know, please help me. It's hard. I have my own company. I teach classes in front of thousands of people all over the world. I run a part of the program for the master's program at SANS. Walking up to somebody and be like, I have no clue what I'm doing, would you help me? That's freaking hard. But to be honest with you, people come up to me all the time and they ask me about some of the work that I've done, like with Kerberoasting and stuff. If you walk up to somebody who has done some sort of technique, by and large, they are thrilled to talk to you. Because you're taking an interest in their hard work. And they have a passion for whatever they did and be like, you know what, let's sit down, let's do this right now. I would be happy to walk you through, step by step, exactly what I did. Or point you in the right direction. Hey, check this out, check this out. People in this industry are very open and very sharing. If they're not, forget them. Right? If they're a jerk, it probably means they don't know what they're talking about, and they're just pushing you aside because they don't want to reveal it. Find somebody else. There are tons of people in this industry that will happily help you out. But you have to be willing to say, I don't know. Or somebody come help. Right? Whoa, that was awesome ending. Whoa, very dramatic. So related to that too, teach others. Right? As you learn something, I used to do this at a company I worked for in Minnesota. We would sit down at lunch, and we'd be like, hey, here's this cool thing that I figured out. There's a fantastic group in Dallas. We call it Dallas Hackers Association, DAHA. There's another one in Austin, AHA, Austin Hackers Anonymous. And there's others all over the place. But what we do is we encourage new people to show up and just get up in front and talk for 5 to 10 minutes about what you're working on. Is it going to be the latest and greatest leap thing? No. In fact, I hope not. It's interesting to see people work through their path, and we'll sit down and grab a beer afterwards, and we'll talk about it and come up with new, different, interesting things. And then someone will come up and show their really interesting talk. Come and do some talks at conferences like this. Will your first talk suck? Absolutely. My first talk was horrible. I got diarrhea of the mouth. It was a 60-minute talk. I finished it in 23 minutes. And what's sad is, like, during the talk, I'm like, I'm going too fast. Stop. I can't make it stop. I can't make it stop. I don't know what I'm doing right now, but the words should come out faster. And it just kept happening. But you'll do enough of these talks, you'll watch the recordings, you're like, you know what? I say a lot. I say right all the time. Let me work on my delivery. You're at these talks this week, watch other people and be like, hey, I like what he did with his presentation. But I would encourage you, get up and present on some of your talks. I've got one of the guys that I recently hired at my company. He did a talk at DerbyCon on Exploitation 101. And he walked through, this is how the basics of some exploitation works. The room was packed. Absolutely packed. There were all sorts of cutting-edge attacks going on at the same time. He had so many people come up to him afterwards. They're like, thank you for giving that talk. And they would say, like, I know it's not very advanced, but I needed that, and I was too afraid to ask other people, or I was stuck on a particular subject, and you helped me. So you don't have to walk through the latest and greatest, most cutting-edge. What in the world?
I thought it was just me.
Is that like... Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, so I would encourage you, do those talks. And again, it doesn't have to be advanced. Share your knowledge. And practice some of those skills. And maybe you don't feel comfortable getting in front of people. Write some blog posts. Share that way. There are so many blog posts out there. You don't have to cover some new technique. Show something that you've learned and put your spin on it. Show what you learned and the pieces you got stuck on and ways you worked around it. It is very valuable. It'll help you personally, and it has the potential to help your career as well, right?
And also, if you're in a city or in a place where there's not a group already, there's not like the Austin Hackers group or something. That was my situation, and I started one, and the turnout was amazing. I started a city sect style meetup, which you can go find on Reddit, and we've been doing it for 2 years now, and people have gotten jobs because of coming to that meetup. So I think both of us brought some swag and some merchandise. We have T-shirts and stickers for both companies. If anybody wants them, they're free. I don't think we have enough for everybody, but you can fight over them.
And everybody's scared of clicking on. Look, if I wanted to own you, that is the stupidest way possible.
Which is the
right?
theme of the talk?
It's like, let's get it on video where Tim put a malicious link on and then attacked a bunch of hackers. Dumbest idea ever, right? But anyways, it's just our contact information. If you have questions, drop us an email, hit us up on Twitter. I will respond to email. I am not necessarily fast with email, but I will respond. Okay? If you guys have questions, we'll grab questions out in the hallway. Other than that, thank you all so much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your time.